Climbing gear is engineered to survive forces that would tear a human body apart. Carabiners rated to 5,000 pounds, ropes tested to hold multiple falls, protection pieces designed to never fail. But sometimes the flaw isn't visible until it's already too late. In 2023 alone, forensic engineers investigated 47 climbing deaths where equipment failure was suspected. In 12 of those cases, the gear showed no external signs of damage. The failure happened at the molecular level, invisible to the human eye. From a cam that looked perfect on inspection but had microfractures from a previous fall, its aluminum slowly crystallizing under repeated stress. To a bolt drilled into rock that appeared solid but was slowly corroding from the inside. To a climber who placed his protection exactly by the book, never knowing the metal had already begun its silent betrayal. But first, the climber whose gear was sent to a forensic lab, where engineers would discover that the piece that failed had been dying for months, and there was no way he could have known. This wasn't negligence or bad luck. It was physics operating on a timescale humans can't perceive. James Peterson trusted his equipment because he had no reason not to. The flaw that killed him was invisible, inevitable, and already written into the metal long before he clipped in. October 14th, 2023. Red Rock Canyon, Nevada. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sandstone face as 34-year-old James Peterson prepared for his climb. A mechanical engineer with 12 years of climbing experience, James was known for his methodical approach to safety. He'd climbed Crimson Corridor, a 5.11c traditional route, twice before, but backed off due to weather. Today would be different. James laid out his protection gear, 12 cams, 8 nuts, 15 quick draws, meticulously inspecting each piece. His climbing partner Sarah watched him test every mechanism. "This is why I climb with you," she joked. "You make me feel safe." He showed her his number 2 Camelot cam. "This one's rated to 14 kilonewtons," he said. "It could hold a small car." The cam showed no external damage, no bent lobes, no frayed slings. What James couldn't see were the microscopic stress fractures in the axle, propagating deeper with each use. At 7:23 a.m., James began climbing, placing protection every 8 to 10 feet. Each placement was textbook perfect. At 78 feet, he reached the crux, a thin vertical crack. He placed the number 2 Camelot at 79 feet, tugged it with his full weight, and it held firm. "Good pro," he shouted down. The stress fracture had reached critical length. A static load wouldn't complete the fracture, but a dynamic fall would. James clipped his rope and moved upward. At 82 feet, his foot slipped on a polished hold. He fell. The fall generated approximately 6 kilonewtons of force, well within the cam's rating. But in 0.003 seconds, the stress fracture propagated through the axle. The cam failed with a metallic ping. James dropped past his last protection point, swinging violently into the wall. His left side impacted a protruding edge. The helmet camera recorded the sickening crunch. Sarah, yanked upward by the force, heard James scream, then silence. He hung motionless, 68 feet up. Blood dripped onto the rock below. Sarah's hands shook as she dialed 911 at 7:34 a.m. The rescue was a race against time. Red Rock SAR arrived at 8:03 a.m. By 8:34 a.m., exactly 60 minutes after impact, James was on the ground, being loaded into a medevac helicopter. He survived, but the recovery would take months. The failed cam was sent to Black Diamond's engineering lab, where forensic engineer Dr. Marcus Chen would discover that the perfect-looking protection had been dying for months. Sarah Jenkins, 31, a high school biology teacher and certified belay instructor, had caught dozens of falls without incident. Friends called her unshakable. She and James had been climbing partners for 3 years, building absolute trust. When James fell, Sarah's training kicked in. She locked off the rope and braced for the catch. But then came the sound that would haunt her nightmares, the metallic ping of gear failing. As James hung unconscious, Sarah faced an impossible choice. Hold the rope indefinitely, tie off the belay, or try to lower him. Her hands trembling, she transferred his weight to the anchor system and called for help. For 29 agonizing minutes, she sat at the base, staring up at James's motionless body. Her mind spiraled with what-ifs. What if I'd given him a softer catch? What if I'd been standing differently? What if I'd insisted on double protection? At the hospital, paramedic Miguel Torres told her, "You saved his life." Sarah didn't believe him. "I held the rope while he fell," she replied. "Exactly," Miguel said. "You held the rope. That's why he's alive." When Sarah finally examined her hands, she saw the evidence. A friction burn across her right palm from the catch. A permanent reminder. 3 months later, James asked if she wanted to climb with him again. She declined, not because she didn't trust him, but because she didn't trust herself. "What if I freeze next time?" she asked. "What if I can't catch you?" Sarah had done everything right. She caught the fall, held the rope, saved James's life. But the psychological burden of being the last line of defense in a system designed to never fail, that burden doesn't care about technical perfection. At 7:42 a.m., SAR team leader Mark Suchen Hutchinson received the call about an unconscious climber 70 feet up a cliff face. In his mind, the clock started, 52 minutes left in the golden hour, the critical 60-minute window after trauma when survival chances are highest. James was unconscious, possibly bleeding internally, and couldn't assist in his own rescue. The team had to climb to him, stabilize him, and lower him, all while the clock ticked. By 7:56 a.m., the SAR team reached the base. 2 climbers, Jake and Maria, began ascending with 40 pounds of gear each. At 8:03 a.m., Jake reached James and found a weak pulse. They stabilized his neck, secured him in a rescue harness, and began lowering him. At 8:17 a.m., James reached the ground. Paramedics confirmed internal bleeding and head trauma. The medevac helicopter arrived, but there was no suitable landing zone nearby. The team carried James 200 yards across rocky terrain. At 8:34 a.m., exactly 60 minutes after the fall, they reached the landing zone. 6 minutes later, the helicopter lifted off. Flight nurse Elena Rodriguez worked frantically as the aircraft battled turbulence. At 8:51 a.m., James arrived at University Medical Center, where surgeons took over. Hutch debriefed his team. "We made it in 54 minutes, 6 minutes to spare," but he knew it was close. Too close. And the question remained, why did the cam fail? 2 days after the accident, a small box arrived at Black Diamond's lab in Salt Lake City. Inside, the failed number 2 Camelot, serial number BD-2023-04-17892. Dr. Marcus Chen, lead forensic engineer, began his investigation. The axle had snapped cleanly, but everything else looked perfect. Was it defective from the factory? Damaged during use? Placed incorrectly? Or was the fall force higher than expected? Under the microscope, Marcus saw that the fracture surface wasn't smooth, but had 2 distinct zones. A rough, oxidized area, the slow-growing crack, and a smooth, shiny area, the final failure. This confirmed his hypothesis. Stress fracture. Scanning electron microscope analysis revealed work hardening, the metal becoming brittle from repeated loading. The crack had propagated through approximately 60% of the axle before the final failure. Marcus cross-referenced James's climbing logs with the cam's serial number. Purchased on July 12, 2023, James had used it on 23 climbs, taking small falls on 8 occasions. Each fall propagated the stress fracture deeper until October 14th, when it was primed to fail. Examining manufacturing records, Marcus discovered the cam was part of a batch produced in April 2023. Testing other samples from the same batch, he found the same issue. The axles were work hardening faster than expected. This wasn't user error, it was a manufacturing defect. On October 20th, Black Diamond recalled all 3,400 units from that batch. The company redesigned the axle using a different aluminum alloy more resistant to work hardening, increased its diameter, and implemented more rigorous testing. Marcus's 47-page report concluded, the cam failed due to a stress fracture in the axle caused by work hardening from repeated loading cycles, accelerated by a manufacturing defect in the aluminum alloy. The user placed the cam correctly and used it within its rated parameters. The International Climbing and Mountaineering Federation updated its testing standards, requiring fatigue testing for all climbing cams. But climbers were left with an unsettling question: how do we know our gear is safe? The answer? We don't, completely. We can only inspect regularly, retire gear after heavy use, and accept that no piece of equipment lasts forever. James Peterson did everything right. The cam looked perfect, functioned perfectly, and was placed perfectly, but the flaw that nearly killed him was invisible, written into the metal at the molecular level. 4 perspectives, 1 fall, 1 invisible flaw. These stories share a common thread: trust. Trust in equipment, trust in partners, trust in systems designed to never fail. But sometimes the flaw isn't visible until it's too late, and sometimes doing everything right still isn't enough. On vertical stone, trust is measured in the integrity of aluminum crystals, and in the knowledge that every piece of gear has a lifespan, even if you can't see it ending.